My son got an empty box for Christmas, then he gave one back, and it changed everything. I always thought Christmas was supposed to be a time of joy and giving, especially for kids. That belief was put to the test last year when my sister-in-law decided to play a cruel joke on my son that left him heartbroken and me seething with quiet rage. Let me give you some background. I'm a high school English teacher, and my husband works in construction. We're comfortable but definitely not wealthy. We live in a modest house in a decent neighborhood and try to focus on experiences rather than material things with our 9-year-old son. He's a sweet, thoughtful kid who gets excited about the smallest gestures of kindness. My husband's brother married a woman I'll just call my sister-in-law. From day one, she's looked down on us. She drives a luxury SUV, lives in the fancy part of town, and never misses an opportunity to mention her latest expensive purchase or exclusive vacation. I've always tried to be civil despite her constant jabs about our quaint house or how she could never manage on a teacher's salary. Every Christmas, the whole family gathers at my in-laws' house for dinner and gift exchange. Sister-in-law usually gives us something that's either wildly inappropriate, like the time she gave me a weight loss cookbook, or suspiciously cheap considering how much she brags about their wealth. Meanwhile, she expects premium gifts from everyone else. Last Christmas started like usual. My son was vibrating with excitement as we arrived, carefully carrying the gifts we'd brought. He'd saved his allowance to buy small presents for everyone, including his aunt. The living room was picture-perfect with twinkling lights, and everyone was chatting and catching up. When it came time for the gift exchange, my son's eyes lit up when he saw the beautifully wrapped box sister-in-law handed him. It was wrapped in shiny blue paper with an elaborate silver bow, by far the most impressive-looking gift under the tree. "This one's for you, buddy," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I picked it out special. My son could barely contain himself. He carefully removed the bow, he always saves them, and unwrapped the paper without tearing it. He opened the box, his face glowing with anticipation. Then his expression changed. Confusion first, then disappointment. "It's empty," he said, turning the box upside down as if something might fall out. The room grew quieter. My husband leaned over to look. Sister-in-law let out a laugh. "Oh my goodness. The gift must have fallen out when I was wrapping it. How silly of me." My son looked up at her, trying to hide his disappointment. "That's okay. What was it supposed to be?" Sister-in-law waved her hand dismissively. "Just a little toy. I'll have to look for it at home." "Sorry about that." She immediately turned away to hand someone else a gift, clearly not intending to discuss it further. My son sat there, holding the empty box, looking small and confused. My husband squeezed my hand, a silent signal to stay calm. I was already feeling my blood pressure rise, but I nodded. Not the time or place. My son, being the sweet kid he is, carefully folded the wrapping paper and put it with his bow, then set the empty box aside. The rest of the gift exchange continued, but I couldn't focus. I kept watching my son, who was trying so hard to smile and be excited for others. When his cousin unwrapped an expensive gaming system from sister-in-law, I saw him glance at his empty box, and my heart broke. Later, when most people had moved to the dining room, I found sister-in-law in the kitchen and approached her. "Hey, about that empty box," I started, keeping my voice low and even. She rolled her eyes. "It was an honest mistake. Don't make a big deal out of it. It obviously upset him," I said. "If you forgot his gift, that's one thing, but..." "Look," she cut me off. "Kids get so many presents these days anyway. He'll live. Besides, it's not like you can afford to give him everything he wants. Consider it a life lesson." I was stunned by her callousness. "A life lesson? He's 9 years old." She shrugged. "Maybe if you or your husband had better jobs, you could buy him whatever he wants instead of relying on family handouts." Before I could respond, my mother-in-law entered the kitchen, and sister-in-law's demeanor instantly changed. She smiled brightly and started chatting about the dinner preparations, effectively ending our conversation. The drive home was quiet. My son fell asleep in the back seat, clutching the bow from the empty box. My husband and I exchanged looks, both of us angry but not wanting to discuss it while our son could potentially wake up and hear. Once we got home and put our son to bed, my husband and I finally talked. "I can't believe she did that," he said, pacing our small living room. "Who gives a kid an empty box for Christmas? She claimed it was a mistake, but did you see how quickly she brushed it off?" I replied. "And she didn't even say what the gift was supposed to be. Just a little toy. If there was really a gift, She would have been specific. My husband sighed. I know. But what can we do? If we make a big deal out of it, she'll twist it around and make us look petty. He was right. Sister-in-law was a master at manipulating situations to make herself look good and others look bad. If we confronted her directly, she'd probably tell everyone we were ungrateful or that we were teaching our son to be materialistic. I don't know, I admitted, but I can't just let this go. She deliberately hurt our son. The next morning, my son came into the kitchen while I was making breakfast. He climbed onto a stool at the counter and watched me flip pancakes. Mom, he said after a while, was Aunt mad at me yesterday? I nearly dropped the spatula. What? No, honey. Why would you think that? He shrugged, looking down at his hands. Because she gave me an empty box. I thought maybe I did something wrong. I put down the spatula and went around the counter to hug him. You didn't do anything wrong. Not at all. Your aunt just made a mistake. Even as I said it, I knew it was a lie. There was no mistake. Sister-in-law had deliberately given my son an empty box to make him feel bad, to remind us that we were less than in her eyes. My son nodded, but I could tell he wasn't convinced. I saved up to buy her that bracelet, he said quietly. I thought she'd like it. I remembered the little beaded bracelet he'd carefully picked out at the craft fair. He'd been so proud of choosing it himself. I'm sure she did like it, I said. Though I doubted sister-in-law had given it a second thought. He seemed to perk up a bit at that and started helping me set the table for breakfast. But seeing his lingering hurt fueled a determination in me. This wasn't just about an empty box anymore. It was about standing up to a bully who thought she could treat my family like we were nothing. Over the next few days, I kept thinking about how to address this. A direct confrontation would backfire. Complaining to other family members would make us look petty. I needed something that would make sister-in-law understand how it felt without giving her ammunition to use against us. Then I remembered that sister-in-law was hosting a big New Year's Eve party at her house. She'd been bragging about it for months. How exclusive it was. How she only invited certain people. We'd received an invitation, though I suspected it was only because my mother-in-law had insisted. That's when the idea came to me. Simple, yet perfect. I discussed it with my husband, who was hesitant at first. Are you sure this is a good idea? He asked. Involving our son and getting back at her? I'm not asking him to be mean or disrespectful, I explained. Just to give her a gift that reflects what she gave him. A taste of her own medicine in the most innocent way possible. My husband thought about it, then slowly nodded. It's actually kind of perfect. She can't even complain about it without admitting what she did to him. We talked to our son, careful not to fuel any negative feelings. We simply asked if he'd like to give his aunt another present for New Year's, since she lost his Christmas gift. His eyes lit up at the chance to be generous, which almost made me reconsider the whole plan. But then I remembered his face when he opened that empty box, and my resolve hardened. We spent the next few days preparing. We found a beautiful gift box, even nicer than the one she'd used. My son decorated it with stickers and drawings. We added tissue paper inside to make it look full, but left it empty. The whole time, my son thought we were creating a special presentation for a gift that would go inside later. On New Year's Eve, we dressed up and drove to sister-in-law's house. It was in an upscale neighborhood, with perfectly manicured lawns and luxury cars in every driveway. Her house was lit up with professional decorations, and I could see waitstaff moving around inside through the large front windows. My son clutched his gift box as we walked up to the door. He was excited to give his aunt another present, believing it would make her happy. I felt a twinge of guilt, but reminded myself that we weren't doing anything cruel, just holding up a mirror. Sister-in-law greeted us at the door, wearing an expensive-looking black dress and enough jewelry to open a small store. Her smile faltered slightly when she saw us. "Oh, you made it," she said, her tone suggesting she'd hoped we wouldn't. Her eyes drifted to the gift box in my son's hands. "What's that?" My son stepped forward, holding out the box with both hands. "I wanted to give you another present, Aunt, since you liked my bracelet so much." Sister-in-law looked uncomfortable but took the box. Several of her friends were watching with interest. "How thoughtful," she said, her voice tight. "Should I open it now?" My son nodded eagerly. "Yes, please." With a forced smile, sister-in-law began to unwrap the gift. The room had grown quieter as more people turned to watch. She was clearly enjoying being the center of attention, probably assuming the box contained something impressive she could show off. She removed the lid and pushed aside the tissue paper. Then she stared at the empty box, her expression freezing. It's just like the one you gave me for Christmas, my son said innocently. You said it was special. I could see the realization dawn on her face. Several of her friends exchanged glances. Someone whispered something I couldn't hear. Sister-in-law's face flushed red. She snapped the lid back on the box. How cute, she managed to say. Thank you. She quickly moved away, placing the box on a side table and engaging someone in forced conversation. But I noticed several people looking at her differently, whispering to each other. My son tugged at my hand. Did she like it, Mom? I knelt down to his level. I think you gave her something to think about, sweetie. That's a very valuable gift. The party continued, but there was a subtle change in the atmosphere. Sister-in-law kept her distance from us, which was fine by me. I overheard snippets of conversations, people asking about the empty box and what was that about. I saw one woman pat my son on the head as she passed by, giving me a knowing look. As we were preparing to leave, my husband's cousin approached me. So, what was with the empty box? She asked quietly. I explained what had happened at Christmas, keeping my tone neutral and factual. She looked shocked. That's horrible. Who does that to a child? I just shrugged. Apparently, it was a life lesson. She shook her head. Well, looks like she got a lesson of her own tonight. On the drive home, I felt lighter somehow. We hadn't made a scene or been disrespectful. We'd simply returned the same gift sister-in-law had given our son, and in doing so, revealed her true nature to her friends. My husband reached over and squeezed my hand. That went better than I expected, he said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. In the rearview mirror, I could see our son sleeping peacefully in the back seat. He'd had fun at the party, completely unaware of the statement he'd helped make. To him, he'd simply given his aunt another present because he was a kind and generous boy. I smiled, feeling a sense of quiet victory. Sister-in-law had tried to make my son feel small and insignificant with her empty box. Instead, she'd only revealed her own emptiness. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a chain of events that would completely change the dynamic of our family. That empty box would come to represent something much bigger than I could have imagined at the time. The weeks following the New Year's Eve party were surprisingly quiet. I'd expected some immediate backlash from my sister-in-law, but instead, there was silence. No passive-aggressive texts, no complaints to other family members, nothing. It was almost eerie. Maybe she's actually embarrassed, my husband suggested one evening as we were cleaning up after dinner. Maybe she realized how bad it looked when your son gave her that empty box. I shook my head, scrubbing harder at a stubborn pot. I doubt it. She's probably just plotting something bigger. He chuckled. You're getting paranoid. You've known her longer than I have, I replied. When has she ever let something go? He considered this, then sighed. Never. You're right. This isn't over. I wasn't sure what form her retaliation would take, but I didn't have to wait long to find out. It started with a phone call from my mother-in-law the following weekend. I just wanted to check if everything's okay, she said, her voice carrying that forced casualness that immediately put me on alert. Everything's fine, I said cautiously. Why do you ask? There was a pause before she continued. Well, I was talking to your sister-in-law yesterday, and she mentioned she's concerned about your son. My grip tightened on the phone. Concerned about what, exactly? She said she's worried about how you're influencing him. She said you coached him to embarrass her at the New Year's party with that empty box thing. She thinks it shows you're teaching him to be vindictive. I had to take a deep breath before responding. Did she happen to mention that she gave him an empty box for Christmas first? And told me it was a life lesson because we can't afford to give him everything he wants? My mother-in-law sounded genuinely surprised. No, she didn't mention that part. I'm not surprised, I said. Look, I can explain exactly what happened. I gave her the full story, keeping my tone as calm and factual as possible. When I finished, there was silence on the other end of the line. I had no idea, she finally said. That doesn't sound like her. But I could hear the doubt in her voice. She had known my sister-in-law for years longer than I had. She knew what she was capable of. I wouldn't make something like this up, I said. And I would never use my son to fight my battles. He genuinely thought he was giving her a nice gift, just like the one she gave him. I believe you, my mother-in-law said, though I wasn't entirely convinced she did. I'll talk to her about this. After we hung up, I called my husband at work to fill him in. He wasn't surprised. Classic move, he said. She's trying to control the narrative. Make herself the victim before anyone can point out she was the instigator. Your mom seemed shocked that her precious daughter-in-law would do such a thing, I said, unable to keep the sarcasm out of my voice. Mom tends to see the best in people, he replied diplomatically. But she's not stupid. If she thinks about it, she'll realize who's telling the truth. I hoped he was right, but I had my doubts. My sister-in-law was very good at manipulating people. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing a pattern. Friends and family members would call or text with odd questions or comments. How are things going with you guys financially? Or, if you ever need to talk about anything, I'm here. Some were more direct. I heard there was some drama at the New Year's party. It became clear that my sister-in-law was spreading rumors, not just about the empty box incident, but about our family in general. I heard from my friend at school that there were whispers about us having money problems, about my husband and I fighting constantly, even suggestions that we weren't treating our son well. She's trying to isolate us, I told my husband after yet another awkward conversation with a family friend. Make everyone think we're unstable so that when she attacks, no one will believe our side. My husband looked troubled. This is getting out of hand. Maybe I should talk to my brother. Do you think he'll listen? He never stands up to her. Probably not, he admitted, but I have to try. The conversation with his brother went about as well as expected. He was defensive of his wife, claimed she was just concerned about us, and suggested we were being paranoid. When my husband brought up the empty box at Christmas, his brother claimed it was just a misunderstanding, that of course there had been a gift and my sister-in-law had simply forgotten to put it in the box. Then where is this gift? My husband asked. It's been over a month. His brother had no answer for that. The situation escalated when my son came home from school one day looking upset. When I asked what was wrong, he wouldn't tell me at first. After some gentle prodding, he finally admitted that his cousin, my sister-in-law's daughter, had been telling the other kids at school that our family was poor, and that's why he didn't get any real Christmas presents. I was furious. It was one thing for my sister-in-law to attack me, but to drag our children into it? To teach her daughter to bully my son? That crossed a line. That evening, I sat down at my computer and began to research. I wasn't exactly sure what I was looking for, but I knew I needed more information if I was going to deal with this situation effectively. My sister-in-law had always been vocal about her success and affluence. She constantly talked about her thriving boutique business, her charity work, her connections with important people in town. But how much of it was real? I'd always had a sense that she was exaggerating, putting on a show. Now I wanted to know the truth. I started with her boutique, a small upscale clothing store in the fancy downtown shopping district. A quick search revealed mixed reviews online, some glowing, but many complaints about poor quality items being sold at premium prices. Several reviews mentioned being refused refunds for defective merchandise. Digging deeper, I found a local business forum where someone had posted asking if anyone had dealt with my sister-in-law's boutique as a vendor. The responses were eye-opening. "Beware," wrote one commenter. "She'll place a big order, receive the goods, then claim they weren't what she ordered or that they arrived damaged. She'll demand a discount or refuse to pay altogether. She did this to my small business, and I know of at least 3 others." Another wrote, "She's known for paying late or not at all. We no longer supply to her store after she strung us along for 6 months on a $5,000 invoice." I was stunned. Was my sister-in-law scamming her suppliers? It would explain how she managed to maintain her lavish lifestyle on what I assumed was a modest income from a small boutique. Next, I looked into her much-touted charity work. She was constantly bragging about her involvement with the local children's hospital, implying she was a major donor and organizer of their fundraising events. But when I checked the hospital's annual donor list, which was published on their website, her name was nowhere to be found among the significant contributors. She was listed only as a member of a volunteer committee, not even as the chair. I kept digging. The more I looked, the more inconsistencies I found between my sister-in-law's carefully crafted image and reality. Her boutique had been cited twice by the local Consumer Protection Agency for misleading advertising. She'd been taken to small claims court 3 times by vendors for non-payment. Her social media was full of posts about exclusive events and luxury purchases, but many of the photos appeared to be stock images or reposts from other accounts. I wasn't planning to expose her, not yet anyway. I just wanted to understand what I was dealing with. But the more I learned, the clearer it became that her entire identity was built on deception. She wasn't just mean-spirited, she was a fraud. One night, while continuing my research, I came across a post in a local community forum that caught my attention. Does anyone have experience with the children's charity fundraiser run by Store Name? The one where they collect donations to buy gifts for kids in need? I donated $200 last year but never received a tax receipt. And when I asked about it, they seemed evasive. My sister-in-law's boutique ran exactly such a fundraiser every holiday season. She collected donations, supposedly to buy gifts for children in local shelters and foster care. She made a big show of it on social media, posting photos of wrapped gifts and claiming to have donated thousands of dollars worth of items. I remembered my son had been so moved by the cause last year that he'd asked to donate some of his allowance. My husband and I had matched his contribution, and together we'd given $100 to the fundraiser. We'd never received a receipt either, but I hadn't thought much of it at the time. Now I was suspicious. Had those donations actually gone to children in need, or had my sister-in-law pocketed the money? I replied to the post, asking if anyone else had similar experiences. Within hours, several people had commented, all with the same story. They'd donated to the fundraiser, never received documentation, and when they'd tried to follow up, they were brushed off or blocked from contacting the boutique. One commenter claimed to work at one of the shelters that was supposed to benefit from the fundraiser. We received a small box of items from them last year, they wrote. Maybe $200 worth at most. Nothing close to the thousands they claimed to collect. This was serious. If my sister-in-law was soliciting donations for charity and then keeping the money, that wasn't just morally wrong, it was illegal. I needed to proceed carefully. Making accusations without solid evidence would backfire spectacularly. I decided to reach out to the person who claimed to work at the shelter, sending them a private message explaining that I was researching the boutique's charitable activities and would appreciate more information. To my surprise, they responded almost immediately. They confirmed that the shelter had received only a token donation from my sister-in-law's boutique, despite being prominently featured in their promotional materials. They also mentioned that several other shelters listed as beneficiaries had reported similar experiences. We've actually been discussing whether to report them to the authorities, they wrote. It seems like they're using our name to collect donations without delivering the promised support. I asked if they'd be willing to go on record with this information, explaining that I was directly affected by my sister-in-law's actions. They were hesitant, but agreed to consider it if enough evidence was gathered. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law's smear campaign against our family continued. My husband reported that colleagues were asking odd questions about our financial situation. My son mentioned that his cousin was still spreading rumors at school. I even got a call from the school counselor, who said she'd heard concerns about our home life and wanted to check if everything was okay. Everything is fine, I assured her, but I'd like to know where these concerns are coming from. She wouldn't give specifics, but mentioned they'd received calls from a concerned family member. It wasn't hard to guess who. At this point, I decided to confide in my closest friend at work, another teacher who I'd known for years. She was shocked by everything I told her. This woman sounds unhinged, she said during our lunch break. Why is she so fixated on making your life miserable? I think it started because I never bought into her act, I replied. Most people are impressed by her designer clothes and big talk, but I always saw through it. That threatens her. My friend considered this. You know, my husband works for the local newspaper. He covers community business. He might be interested in looking into this charity fundraiser situation. I hesitated. I don't know. I don't want to escalate things further. From what you've told me, she's already trying to damage your reputation, possibly your job, and she's encouraging her kid to bully yours. How much worse could it get? She had a point. My sister-in-law had shown no signs of backing down. In fact, her attacks were getting more personal and more dangerous. If she was willing to involve Child Protective Services, as the school counselor's call suggested, where would she stop? Let me talk to my husband about it first, I said. That evening, I filled my husband in on everything I'd discovered about his sister-in-law's business practices and the potentially fraudulent charity fundraiser. He was quiet for a long time after I finished. You know, he finally said, I always suspected she wasn't as successful as she claimed. Her stories never quite added up. But I didn't think she'd go as far as scamming people, especially using charity as a cover. What do you think we should do? I asked. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture he always made when stressed. Part of me wants to confront her directly, but I know that won't work. She'll just deny everything and paint us as the bad guys. My friend offered to connect us with her husband at the newspaper, I said. He could look into the charity fundraiser. My husband thought about it. That could work. It wouldn't come directly from us. And if there's really something shady going on, it should be exposed anyway. It's not just about our feud with her. It's about people being scammed in the name of charity. We decided to take my friend up on her offer. The next day, I gave her the green light to talk to her husband about the situation. A few days later, I met with him at a coffee shop away from school. He was a serious man with a notebook full of questions. I told him everything I knew about the fundraiser, including my own family's donation and the lack of a receipt. I showed him screenshots of the forum discussions and my conversation with the shelter worker. I explained my personal connection to the situation, but emphasized that my concern was the potential fraud, not personal revenge. "This is definitely worth looking into," he said after reviewing my information. "I'll need to do my own research, talk to these shelters directly, check if the boutique is registered as a charitable organization, that sort of thing. If there's a story here, I'll find it." I felt a mixture of relief and anxiety as I left the coffee shop. On one hand, it felt good to finally take action against my sister-in-law's harmful behavior. On the other hand, I knew that if this resulted in a news story, it would cause a huge rift in the family. But hadn't that rift already begun the moment my sister-in-law decided to give my son an empty box for Christmas? Hadn't she been the one to escalate it by spreading rumors and trying to damage our reputation? A week passed with no word from the journalist. I began to wonder if he'd found nothing substantial or had decided the story wasn't worth pursuing. Then my friend pulled me aside after a staff meeting. "My husband is going forward with the story," she whispered excitedly. "He's found a lot more than you even knew. The boutique has been running this fundraiser for 5 years, collecting thousands each year, but the shelters report receiving only minimal donations. And get this, she's been claiming the full amount as a business tax deduction, even though she pocketed most of it." I felt a cold shock run through me. Tax fraud was serious. This could go far beyond a newspaper expose. "When is the story running?" I asked. "Sunday edition, front page of the local section." I nodded, trying to process this information. "Does he mention us at all?" "No, not at all. He focused entirely on the charity angle. He's got statements from 3 different shelters and interviews with several donors who never received receipts. The boutique's financial records are private, of course, but he found enough public information to make it clear something's not right." I thanked my friend and headed back to my classroom, my mind racing. Sunday was just 3 days away. I decided not to tell my husband yet. I didn't want him to have to keep this secret from his brother if they happened to talk before the story broke. Those 3 days felt like the longest of my life. I kept expecting my sister-in-law to somehow find out about the investigation and confront me. But nothing happened. She continued her campaign of whispers and insinuations, oblivious to the storm that was about to break over her head. Sunday morning, I was up early. I drove to the convenience store as soon as it opened and bought a copy of the newspaper. There it was, just as my friend had said. Front page of the local section, a large headline reading "Local Boutique's Charity Fundraiser Under Scrutiny. Where did the money go?" The article was thorough and damning. It detailed 5 years of the boutique's fundraiser, with estimates of how much had been collected each year based on donor interviews. It contrasted these amounts with the much smaller donations actually received by the shelters. It mentioned the lack of proper tax receipts and the boutique's failure to register as a charitable organization. It quoted shelter representatives expressing their disappointment and sense of betrayal. Most importantly, from my perspective, it never mentioned our family or suggested any personal vendetta. It was presented as straightforward investigative journalism into a potential case of charity fraud. I laid the newspaper on the kitchen table and waited for my husband to come downstairs. When he saw the headline, his eyes widened. "Is this?" I nodded. "It just came out this morning." He read the article carefully, his expression growing more troubled with each paragraph. "This is worse than we thought," he said when he finished. "She could face criminal charges for this." "I know," I replied quietly. "I never expected it to go this far. I just wanted the truth to come out." He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You didn't do anything wrong. She brought this on herself." We spent the morning waiting for the fallout. It didn't take long. Around noon, my husband's phone started ringing. It was his brother, sounding panicked. "Have you seen the newspaper today?" he asked without preamble. "Yes," my husband replied calmly. "It doesn't look good. It's a hit piece." His brother exclaimed. "Someone's trying to ruin us. She thinks it might be you guys, because of that stupid empty box thing at Christmas." My husband's voice remained level. Why would we have anything to do with a newspaper investigation into charity fraud? I don't know, but she's freaking out. She says you've always been jealous of her success and wanted to bring her down. That's ridiculous, my husband said. The article doesn't mention us at all. It's about donors who never got receipts and shelters that never got the donations they were promised. If that's true, it has nothing to do with us. There was a pause on the other end of the line. You don't think it's true? His brother finally asked, his voice less certain. I don't know, my husband replied. But if it's not true, she should have no problem providing records to prove all the donations were delivered as promised, right? Another long pause. Look, I should go. She's really upset. I need to be there for her right now. After he hung up, my husband looked at me with a mix of sadness and resolve. He knows, he said simply. On some level, he knows she's been lying. The rest of the day was quiet, but I could feel the tension building, like the air before a storm. My sister-in-law had been publicly exposed, and I knew she wouldn't take it lying down. The question was, who would she blame, and what would she do next? I didn't have to wait long to find out. The next morning, my phone exploded with notifications. My sister-in-law had gone on a social media rampage, posting a long, emotional statement about being attacked by jealous family members who had conspired with local media to spread lies about her business. She didn't name us directly, but the implication was clear to anyone who knew about the family dynamics. She claimed the charity fundraiser had been completely legitimate, that all donations had gone to the children as promised, and that she had documentation to prove it. She painted herself as a victim of a vicious smear campaign and vowed to clear her name. What she didn't count on was the public reaction. Instead of the sympathy she clearly expected, the comments on her post were skeptical, even hostile. People asked why she hadn't provided this documentation to the newspaper reporter. They pointed out that the shelters themselves had gone on record saying they received minimal donations. Some who had donated to the fundraiser demanded to see proof of how their money was used. By midday, she had deleted the post, but the damage was done. The story was spreading beyond the newspaper now, picked up by local social media groups and forums. My sister-in-law's boutique was being flooded with calls and messages from angry donors demanding explanations. And that was only the beginning of her troubles. That afternoon, the local TV news ran a follow-up story about the newspaper investigation, featuring an interview with a representative from the state attorney general's office, who confirmed they were looking into the allegations of charity fraud. This type of misrepresentation, if proven, would constitute a serious violation of state laws regarding charitable solicitations, the official stated. We encourage anyone who donated to this fundraiser to contact our office with information. I watched this unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and unease. I had wanted my sister-in-law to face consequences for her actions, but I hadn't anticipated the scale of the fallout. This had moved far beyond our family dispute. She was now facing potential legal trouble that could affect her business, her finances, and possibly even her freedom. That evening, my mother-in-law called, sounding shaken. Have you seen the news? She asked. Yes, I replied. It's pretty serious. She's saying you're behind it all. That you fed information to the newspaper because of some disagreement about Christmas gifts. I took a deep breath. I didn't write the article. The journalist did his own investigation and found multiple sources confirming the same thing, that the fundraiser money wasn't going where it was supposed to. That has nothing to do with our family dispute. My mother-in-law was quiet for a moment. I never thought she would do something like this, she finally said, her voice small. Taking money meant for children in need. It's hard to believe. I know, I said gently. It's a shock to all of us. Your brother-in-law is standing by her, but I can tell he's troubled. He asked me if I knew anything about their finances, if I thought they might be in difficulty. I didn't know what to tell him. After we hung up, I sat in silence, trying to process everything that had happened. What had started with an empty box at Christmas had spiraled into something I never could have predicted. My sister-in-law's carefully constructed facade was crumbling, revealing the emptiness behind it. The next day brought even more developments. 2 former employees of the boutique came forward, claiming my sister-in-law had instructed them to tell customers that a percentage of all purchases went to charity, when in fact no such donations were being made. They also alleged that she regularly marked up items far beyond their wholesale cost, while claiming they were designer or exclusive. The story was growing bigger by the hour, and I was starting to worry about how it would affect the broader family, especially the children. My son still didn't know the full extent of what was happening. I'd kept the newspaper and turned off the TV news to shield him from it. But I knew he would eventually hear something at school, especially since his cousin was likely aware of the situation. That night, I sat down with my husband to discuss how to handle the next phase of this unfolding drama. We needed a plan for talking to our son, for dealing with family gatherings, and for responding if my sister-in-law directly accused us of being behind the newspaper story. Little did we know, events were about to overtake our careful planning, pushing this family conflict to its breaking point and forcing a final reckoning that would change everything. The morning after the TV news story aired, I woke up to dozens of missed calls and messages. Friends, family members, even parents of my students were reaching out. Some were supportive, having connected the dots between the boutique owner and the news and my sister-in-law. Others were curious, fishing for gossip. A few were accusatory, clearly having heard my sister-in-law's version of events. I was about to start responding when my phone rang again. It was my husband's brother. I hesitated before answering. What could he possibly want? To accuse me? To beg for help? I took a deep breath and picked up hello? His voice was strained, barely recognizable. Did you know about this? Did you start all this? I closed my eyes, choosing my words carefully. I didn't write the newspaper article, if that's what you're asking. But you knew about the investigation before it was published, didn't you? He pressed. You could have warned us. The accusation in his tone made my temper flare. Warned you about what? That your wife was scamming people using charity as a cover? Maybe if you'd warned us that she was planning to humiliate our son with an empty Christmas gift, we could have prevented this whole situation. There was a long silence. Then, to my surprise, he started to cry. Not just a few quiet tears, but deep, heaving sobs that made it difficult for him to speak. I didn't know, he finally managed to say, about any of it. I swear. I thought the boutique was doing well. I thought the charity thing was real. I believed her when she said the empty box was a mistake. His anguish sounded genuine, and I felt a pang of sympathy despite everything. I'm sorry, I said softly. This must be a shock for you. You have no idea, he replied, his voice hollow. The Attorney General's office showed up at our house this morning with a warrant. They're taking her financial records, computers, everything. She's been crying and screaming all morning, alternating between blaming you and begging me to help her. I didn't know what to say. This was moving faster than I'd anticipated. What are you going to do? I asked finally. He let out a long, shaky breath. I don't know. The lawyer we called said the evidence doesn't look good. She could be facing fraud charges, maybe even jail time. And they said our home could be at risk if they find evidence that stolen money went into our mortgage payments. The gravity of the situation hit me like a physical blow. This was no longer about an empty box or family squabbles. This was about real, serious consequences that would affect innocent people, including my niece. I'm sorry, I said again, meaning it. I never wanted things to go this far. But you're not sorry it came out, he observed. Not angrily, but with a strange calmness. No, I admitted. I'm not sorry the truth came out. People deserved to know their donations weren't reaching children in need. But I am sorry for the pain this is causing you and your daughter. He was quiet for a moment. You know what's ironic? We're not even rich. All that showing off, the designer clothes, the fancy car, it was all financed by debt. We're drowning in it. I thought the boutique was our way out. But now I realize it was just another hole she was digging. This revelation didn't surprise me as much as it might have once. After my research into my sister-in-law's business practices, I'd suspected her affluent lifestyle wasn't as solid as she pretended. What about your daughter? I asked. How is she taking all this? He sighed. She doesn't know the full extent yet. Just that her mom is in trouble for something to do with the store. She's confused and scared. I'm worried about how this might affect her relationship with my son at school, I said. They've already had some tensions. I know, he replied, surprising me. She told me she's been saying things about your family. My wife encouraged it. I should have put a stop to it, but I didn't want to go against her. I see now how wrong that was. His candor was unexpected, but welcome. For the first time, I felt like there might be a path forward for our families, even if it would be a difficult one. Maybe we could get the kids together sometime, I suggested tentatively. Help them understand that adult problems shouldn't affect their relationship. I'd like that, he said, sounding grateful. After all this settles down a bit. After we hung up, I filled my husband in on the conversation. He was as surprised as I was by his brother's vulnerability and apparent willingness to acknowledge his wife's wrongdoing. He's always defended her, no matter what, my husband said, shaking his head in wonder. This must have really shaken him. The Attorney General showing up at your door with a warrant would shake anyone, I pointed out. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from my friend at school. Turn on the local news now, it read. We rushed to the TV and switched to the local station. There she was, my sister-in-law, being escorted out of her boutique by officers from the Attorney General's office. The crawl at the bottom of the screen read, "Local store owner under investigation for charity fraud and tax evasion." The reporter on the scene was explaining that authorities had seized financial records and computers from both the boutique and the owner's home. Sources tell us the investigation is centered on a holiday fundraiser that allegedly collected thousands of dollars for children in need, but delivered only a fraction of the promised donations. The owner may also face tax fraud charges for claiming business deductions for the full amount of purported charitable contributions. They cut to an interview with one of the shelter directors, who expressed disappointment and betrayal. We trusted this business to help children in our care. To think they were using our name to collect money that never reached those kids. It's heartbreaking. The next segment showed parents outside my sister-in-law's boutique, expressing outrage. Many had donated to the fundraiser, believing they were helping children while supporting a local business. Others had purchased items under the impression that a percentage went to charity. I feel completely deceived, one woman said angrily. I brought my children here to teach them about giving back. What kind of lesson is this? I felt a mixture of vindication and sadness watching the coverage. My sister-in-law had brought this on herself through years of deception, but the public humiliation was still difficult to witness. My husband switched off the TV, looking troubled. This is going to get ugly before it gets better, he said. He was right. Over the next few days, the story dominated local news. More details emerged about the scope of the fraud, not just the holiday fundraiser, but years of misleading customers about charitable contributions and misrepresenting the boutique's merchandise. Former employees came forward with stories of being instructed to lie to customers, switch tags on clothing to inflate prices, and mishandle returns. My sister-in-law made one disastrous attempt to defend herself in a teary social media video, claiming she was the victim of a family vendetta and media persecution. But the evidence against her was too substantial, and the public backlash to her video was swift and brutal. She deleted it within hours, then deactivated all her social media accounts. Meanwhile, our son was picking up on the tension. Though we'd tried to shield him from the specifics, he knew something serious was happening. One evening, he approached me while I was preparing dinner. "Mom, is Aunt in trouble because of the empty box?" he asked, his eyes wide and worried. I put down the knife I was using to chop vegetables and knelt to his level. "No, sweetie. Your aunt is in trouble because of some choices she made with her business. It has nothing to do with the Christmas gift or your New Year's present to her." He seemed to consider this. "But Katie at school said her mom is going to jail because we got her in trouble." Katie was my niece. I sighed, realizing we couldn't protect him from this conversation any longer. "Your aunt might be in trouble with the law," I explained carefully. "But it's because of things she did wrong with money, not because of anything we did. Sometimes adults make bad choices, and then they have to face the consequences. But that doesn't mean we can't still care about them and hope they learn from their mistakes." He nodded slowly. "Like when I took an extra cookie without asking, and you grounded me from dessert for a day?" I smiled at his simple comparison. "Something like that, but much more serious. Adult consequences can be bigger because adult mistakes can hurt more people." "Is Katie going to jail too?" he asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "No, of course not," I reassured him. "Katie didn't do anything wrong, and neither did your uncle. This is just about your aunt." He seemed relieved by this. "Can I still be friends with Katie? She's been mean sometimes, but I think she's just sad now." His compassion touched me deeply. Despite everything, he was still thinking about his cousin's feelings. "Of course you can be friends with her," I said, hugging him. "In fact, I think she could really use a friend right now." The legal proceedings moved faster than I expected. Within 2 weeks, the Attorney General's office had filed formal charges against my sister-in-law: charity fraud, tax evasion, and false advertising. The evidence was apparently so overwhelming that her lawyer advised her to cooperate and seek a plea deal rather than fight the charges. My brother-in-law called again to update us on the situation. He sounded exhausted but more clear-headed than before. She's going to plead guilty to reduced charges, he said. The lawyer thinks she'll avoid jail time because she's a first-time offender, but she'll have to pay restitution to all the donors they can identify, plus fines, and probably do community service. She'll also lose the boutique. It's being liquidated to help pay what she owes. How are you holding up? My husband asked him. Honestly, I'm still in shock. But I'm also relieved, in a way, living with her constant need to keep up appearances, always spending more than we had, lying to everyone, including me. It was exhausting. I just didn't realize how bad it had gotten. Are you staying together? I asked cautiously. There was a pause before he answered. No, I filed for separation. I need to protect myself and my daughter financially, and I just can't trust her anymore. Finding out your wife has been lying about something so fundamental for years, it changes everything. My husband expressed sympathy, and they talked for a while about practical matters, living arrangements, explaining things to their daughter, dealing with family gatherings in the future. It was a difficult conversation, but it felt honest in a way that interactions with that side of the family never had before. After the call ended, my husband turned to me with a thoughtful expression. You know, in a weird way, that empty box at Christmas might have been the best thing that could have happened to our family. I raised an eyebrow. How do you figure that? Think about it. If she hadn't done something so deliberately cruel to our son, you might never have given her that empty box at New Year's. If you hadn't done that, she might not have started her smear campaign against us. If she hadn't done that, you might never have looked into her business practices. And if you hadn't done that research, the charity fraud might have continued for years, I finished, seeing his point. More people would have been scammed. Your brother might have gone deeper into debt keeping up with her spending. Their marriage would have continued on its unhealthy path. Exactly, he said. One empty box led to the collapse of a house of cards that was bound to fall eventually. Better now than after even more damage was done. I had to admit there was truth to his perspective. What had seemed like a petty family conflict had unexpectedly led to important truths being revealed, and necessary changes being made. The legal process continued to unfold over the next few months. My sister-in-law accepted a plea deal that included 3 years of probation, substantial financial restitution, and 500 hours of community service at one of the shelters she had claimed to support. She was also barred from operating a business that handled charitable donations in the future. The boutique was closed and liquidated, with the proceeds going to pay back the defrauded donors and charities. My brother-in-law moved with my niece to a smaller apartment and took a second job to handle the remaining debts. It was a difficult transition for them, especially for my niece, who had grown accustomed to the lifestyle her mother had cultivated. At my husband's suggestion, we invited them over for dinner about a month after they moved. It was awkward at first. My brother-in-law seemed ashamed, and my niece was quiet and withdrawn. But as the evening progressed, the tension began to ease. My son showed his cousin his new video game, and soon they were playing together as if the past conflicts had never happened. While the kids were occupied, my brother-in-law opened up more about the aftermath of the scandal. I should have seen the signs, he said, shaking his head. The constant lying about small things, the obsession with appearances, the jealousy of anyone she perceived as a threat. It wasn't healthy, and I enabled it for years. We all have blind spots when it comes to people we love, my husband said kindly. The hardest part has been explaining it all to my daughter, he continued. She idolized her mother, believed everything she said. Finding out that so much of it was lies has been devastating for her. How is she doing now? I asked. Better, I think. We're in family therapy, which helps. And ironically, our relationship has improved since moving to the apartment. I'm more present, more involved in her daily life. Before, I was always working overtime to keep up with the bills, and when I was home, her mother dominated all the attention. The evening ended on a positive note, with tentative plans for future get-togethers. As they were leaving, my niece surprised me by giving me a hug. Thank you for inviting us, she said quietly. Dad says we're going to be okay, just different. Your dad's right, I told her. Different can be good. Over the next year, a new family dynamic gradually emerged. My sister-in-law remained on the periphery, focused on fulfilling the terms of her probation and, according to my brother-in-law, continuing to blame everyone but herself for her situation. She had limited, supervised visits with her daughter, which my niece found both comforting and confusing. My brother-in-law, meanwhile, underwent a remarkable transformation. Freed from the pressure of maintaining his wife's artificial lifestyle, He became more relaxed, more genuine. He reconnected with family members he'd distanced himself from during his marriage, including his parents and us. He even started dating again, cautiously, about a year after the separation was finalized. The most meaningful change, from my perspective, was in the children. My son and his cousin developed a real friendship, built on honesty and mutual support rather than the forced cousin relationship they'd had before. My niece spent a lot of time at our house, seeming to appreciate the stability and normality of our family life. One afternoon, while the kids were playing in the backyard, my brother-in-law and I sat on the patio watching them. "I never thanked you properly," he said unexpectedly. "For what?" I asked, genuinely puzzled. "For being the one person who wouldn't play along with her charade. For standing up for your son when she tried to hurt him. For helping bring the truth to light, even though you must have known it would cause a family explosion." I was momentarily speechless. Of all the outcomes I might have imagined from the empty box incident, receiving gratitude from my brother-in-law hadn't been one of them. "I never meant for things to go as far as they did," I finally said. He shook his head. "It would have come out eventually. The financial house of cards was already starting to collapse. Better to have it happen before she dragged us down even further." I thought about the empty box that had started it all. Such a small thing, really, but so deliberately cruel. And then about the empty box my son had given in return, a simple act of poetic justice that had unexpectedly set off a chain reaction. "It's strange how things work out," I mused. "Sometimes the smallest actions have the biggest consequences." "True," he agreed. "Though I'm pretty sure that giving a kid an empty box for Christmas is never going to work out well for anyone." We both laughed, a genuine moment of shared understanding that would have been impossible a year earlier. As Christmas approached again, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed since the previous year. The superficial family peace had been shattered, but in its place, something more authentic had begun to grow. We decided to host Christmas Eve dinner at our house that year. My brother-in-law and niece came, as did my mother-in-law and several other family members who had distanced themselves during my sister-in-law's reign. My sister-in-law was not invited. She was spending the holiday with her parents in another state, having moved there after completing her probation. The gathering was relaxed and genuine in a way family events had never been before. People talked and laughed without the undercurrent of tension that had always been present when my sister-in-law was around. Even my mother-in-law seemed more at ease, no longer walking on eggshells to avoid offending her daughter-in-law. After dinner, as we gathered in the living room for the gift exchange, my son handed a package to his cousin. "I picked it out myself," he said proudly. For a moment, I felt a flash of concern. Was this appropriate, given what had happened the previous year? But then I saw the genuine excitement on my son's face and realized I was overthinking it. My niece carefully unwrapped the gift, revealing a friendship bracelet kit. "This is perfect," she exclaimed. "We can make them together." She hugged my son, and they immediately sat down on the floor to examine the contents of the kit. My brother-in-law caught my eye across the room and smiled, a smile that acknowledged how far we'd all come. Later that evening, after everyone had left and we were cleaning up, my husband found the empty gift box my niece had left behind. He held it up with a grin. "Should we save this for next year? Start a new family tradition of passing around an empty box?" I laughed and took it from him. "I think we've had enough drama with empty boxes to last a lifetime." As I tossed the box into the recycling bin, I thought about the strange journey of the past year. What had begun as a small, mean-spirited act had led to a complete restructuring of our family dynamics and ultimately, I believed, to a healthier and more honest relationship with everyone involved. The empty box my sister-in-law had given my son had been meant to make him feel small and unimportant. Instead, it had set in motion a series of events that revealed her own emptiness and eventually freed the rest of us from her toxic influence. If there was a lesson in all of this, perhaps it was that even the cruelest actions can sometimes lead to unexpected positive outcomes. Or maybe it was simply that truth, however painful, is always better than deception in the long run. Whatever the case, as I looked at my husband and son, secure in our modest but loving home, I knew I wouldn't trade our honest life for all the designer clothes and social status in the world. We had come out on top, not by winning a battle against my sister-in-law, but by remaining true to ourselves and each other. And there wasn't an empty box in the world that could take that away.